In the mid-90s, the three biggest names in entertainment, Sega, Universal Studios, and Steven Spielberg's DreamWorks, joined forces to build the future of fun. They poured millions into creating high-tech playgrounds so immersive, so advanced, they made every other arcade look like a relic. It was going to be everywhere. But building the future is expensive. Today, we're peeling back the curtain on the arcade empire that was supposed to take over the world. And more importantly, we're going to take a trip through some of the most groundbreaking games that made these locations feel like magic. I was there at the original GameWorks in Seattle shortly after it opened, and spent way too many days off in front of those cabinets. So keep in mind, what I'm about to share comes mostly from my own direct personal experience. Now before we jump into the games, we have to take a quick look at GameWorks itself. That original location opened in Seattle in March 1997. MTV even threw a live premiere party. Will Smith and Carmen Electra were there. Beck and Coolio performed. I mean, it was insane. Vegas opened a few months later with a 75-foot rock climbing wall. California followed, and even had Tony Hawk doing his aerial tricks at its opening. The plan was for 100 locations by 2002. But each venue cost up to $10 million, and getting prime real estate was a nightmare. And then, DreamWorks pulled out in 2001. The chain peaked at around 30 locations. They filed bankruptcy in 2004. Sega tried to salvage it, but then sold it off. Locations kept closing. And by Christmas Eve 2021, it looked like the lights had finally gone out. But here's the twist. In August of 2022, that downtown Seattle spot, where it all began, reopened its doors. As of today, it's the last one standing, a lone phoenix from the ashes. But why do we even care? It wasn't the GameWorks food or the rock wall, it was the games. So let's talk about the experiences that were actually on those floors. If you walked into a GameWorks in 1997, the first thing that would grab you was the sound and motion of the racing games. They had one called Sega Super GT, which outside of the US was also known as Scud Race. This thing was a visual powerhouse. It ran on Sega's Model 3 hardware, which was so advanced it made home consoles look like toys. You were racing Ferraris and McLaren F1s in the BPR Global GT series. Unlike the aggressive, slide-heavy drifting in Daytona, USA, Scud Race introduced a smoother, more gradual drift system. And the cabinet itself was this massive motion-based cradle system that would throw you around with immersive force feedback. It felt like you were actually in a car. But here's what most players didn't realize. That smooth drift system, it actually required more precision than Daytona's power slides. You couldn't just yank the wheel and pray. Oh, and right next to it, you'd probably hear someone yelling. That would be Wave Runner. It was a piece of machinery. Sega took real Yamaha Wave Runner chassis and bolted it onto a 3-axis hydraulic platform running on Model 2 hardware. You had to lean your whole body to steer through tropical ocean courses. You could feel the realistic wave physics fighting you. It was a total body experience that you just couldn't get at home. The tricky part was learning to trust the lean. Fight it too much and you'd wipe out. Go with it and you'd feel like you were actually skipping across the water. Now, you can't talk about immersive sit-down arcade experiences without mentioning the 1994 Jurassic Park game from Sega. This thing was an absolute monster on the floor. The cabinet was designed to look like the back of a Ford Explorer, the same tour vehicle used from the film. You and a friend would slide into those seats, but that seat wasn't static. It was powered by hydraulic pistons, so when a T-Rex stomped the ground behind you, you actually shook. The game itself was a rail shooter with a joystick, where you'd blast away against velociraptors leaping at the windshield, pteranodons swooping down, and the Tyrannosaurus crashing through fences multiple times. The first time that T-Rex roared and your seat shook beneath you, it felt closer to being in a movie than anything else in the arcade. Remember the skateboarding craze in the late 90s? Sega had it covered with twin sensations. Top Skater and its sequel, Air Tricks, used a physical skateboard controller that you actually stood on. You'd lean to steer, and the board would tilt with your movements. Here's what made them different. Top Skater was about racing to the finish line, but Air Tricks shifted the focus entirely. It was all about technical half-pipe tricks, stringing together combos and collecting coins to progress. It was like Tony Hawk Pro Skater, but you were physically doing it. It was exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure. Then you had the games that would make you flinch. Gunblade New York was a high-octane light gun shooter, where you manned a mounted machine gun on a Special Forces helicopter. Your mission was to clear cyborg terrorists out of a fully 3D rendered Manhattan. The guns themselves were massive, heavy-duty swivel mounts that vibrated intensely as you fired. It was chaotic, it was loud, and it made you feel like you were in the middle of an action movie. But here's what most players miss. The vibration wasn't a show. It was tied to the recoil of the virtual gun, which meant holding down the trigger too long would shake your aim off target. You had to fire in controlled bursts. But the king of the horror aisle was the House of the Dead. This was the definitive horror light gun game that single-handedly revived the zombie genre in arcades. What you might not realize is how revolutionary it was. It featured branching paths based on which hostages you managed to save. Your choices actually mattered. And the bosses? They required real strategy to beat. Let me tell you about the magician. He had patterns, tells, moments of vulnerability. You had to learn him like a fighting game opponent.
Kate, this is our only chance. We have to take him while he's weak. We've only got one shot at him.
And for competitive players, Virtua Fighter 3 was the king. Built on Sega's powerful Model 3 hardware, it was just a massive leap forward. The graphics were stunning, and the uneven terrain now affected strategy. Fighting on a slope actually mattered. New characters also joined the roster, but the real game changer was dodging. You could now sway to avoid attacks, adding deep mind games beyond simple blocking. Master the dodge system, and you felt truly untouchable. So that was the mechanic, but here's the problem it created. Once you got good at dodging, you started facing players who would bait you into dodging and then punish your recovery frames. The mind games cut deep fast. Released in 1999, F355 Challenge was the ultimate racing simulator. Its deluxe cabinet featured three 29-inch monitors for 170-degree panoramic vision, powered by 4 synchronized Naomi units. With an authentic Momo wheel, a gated shifter, and 3 pedals, it delivered a pure Ferrari experience. There was no forgiveness. Brake too late and you'd spin. I mean, it was brutally difficult, but a clean lap made you feel like a racing god. The tricky part was that gated shifter. You had to be precise or you'd miss the gate entirely and end up grinding into neutral while the field passed you. And last but not least, Crycraft from 2003 felt like the future. You actually hung from an inverted electric motion system, suspended in a futuristic pod. Used for racing games, like Initial D, the cabinet tilted and swung with every turn, leaving you floating through corners. It was rare and expensive. It was disorienting at first, and then became unforgettable. A pure motion experience you wouldn't forget. Check this out. Because you were suspended, the motion was way smoother than any hydraulic system. It felt like flying, not driving. And it ruined every other racing cabinet for me, forever. So that's the story of GameWorks and some highlights of its incredible arcade experiences. A monument to late 90s optimism, and now, the sole survivor in the city where it all began. It's a reminder that running a business is tough, but the real legacy isn't about the company structure, it's those incredible game cabinets. It's the feeling of leaning into a turn on Wave Runner, or the shock of a zombie bursting through the door in the House of the Dead. For those of us who were there, it's like a time machine, and for those who weren't, I hope this video gave you a taste of what it was actually like. What's your best memory of going to an arcade like this? Let me know in the comments. I'm genuinely curious to hear what stuck with you. And if this retro tech spectacle hit the spot, then hitting that like button is the best way to let me know. If you're new here, welcome. We're all about these deep dives into gaming's most fascinating eras. Subscribe so you don't miss my next video. Alright my friends, this is the Retro Gaming Boss signing out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.
reservas,